The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
On TECHxploration, your trusted tour guides, Craig and David, will explore every corner of Florida for the latest tech and innovations emerging within our communities as an inside look ahead at Florida's future.
Howdy. Welcome to episode 17 of TECHxploration on the Florida Podcast Network. Here we're discovering the tech and innovation spaces thriving under the Florida sun. I'm one of your hosts, Craig.
And I'm David, and we're from Clarity Creative Group, an Orlando-based digital marketing agency. Let's dive in.
On today's episode, we're going to talk about the iPhone 14 because Apple is so good at making us buy things.
Then Caleb Smith of Jefferson Capital, LLC, joins us for an amazing conversation on blockchain technology.
And we'll end the episode with this week's tech tip from Kai Gomez. Oh, David. The days of iPhones 11, 12, 13, 14. The iPhone 14 is here. Do you already have it? When are you going to have it? What does it have? And why do I need it?
Pre-orders started on September 9th, and I know that by the time this comes out, that has already passed. And the first date that you could pick it up is on the 16th. I did order one this morning, being that today is the day where it started. I did. It happened. Mine's 4 years old, which is like ancient in the iPhone era. So I needed it.
Wait. You needed it. You said I needed it.
I needed it. Okay. It's an iPhone, so it's going to look and feel similar to what we're all used to, right? That's the close end. But things are a little faster. Their regular iPhone 14 Pro, and there's Pro Max or whatever, which is a little bit bigger. So I was looking at the two of them. The camera on the newest iPhone is like, I know there's an article. It's like 48 megapixels. 40.
Well, that's so many. What do you mean?
48 megapixels. The non-Pro one is like 12 megapixels. And I was like, whoa. So the quality of that's just nuts. And for me, I want a better one to take photos. You know, I know you got your son, I got my daughter, and I've been taking some good ones. But my mom has a slightly newer iPhone than me because that's a good person. And Tim Cook said that you should buy your mom an iPhone. I did. I got her a newer iPhone than me, a year ago. And her pictures are better than mine. I know because it's better.
That's irritating to you.
Well, but I know it's not because she takes it better. I know it's because it's the phone at some point just makes it better. And again, that alone to me was like, oh, that's really cool. It's going to be significantly faster. And they have something, the Max has something called, oh, not the Max, I'm sorry, the Pro version has now, you know how like the newer iPhones have the notch, which people complain about? It has something called now the pill.
What is this?
So it's kind of cool. It is and it's not. It's kind of silly, but it somehow works. So like notifications and like alerts and things now come from like the little center area, like where the notch is, but it's like a pill shape, like a Tylenol, like a rounded button type of thing. And like the alerts, and you can't see, and I wish you could, like comes out from it and then goes back in. So it feels like it's like a part of it, but obviously nothing ever goes over that, like where the speaker is, but it makes it feel like it uses it.
It's very weird.
It is. So the alert like pops up and goes in, or like a phone call comes in. It's like black, right? It'll say the name, but of course, like where the notch is you never have text over it, but it feels like that's a part of like that alert.
Right. You're saying this is a complete user experience of what you're seeing on because again, the iPhone at this point is just a screen. That's what it is, right? It doesn't have anything beyond a screen.
The same way our physical phone right now, it just goes around it. Right. Imagine if like something came out of it, felt like it came out of that. And that's what they're doing with it to make it feel like it was there on purpose and it's like being used. So there's an actual screen that goes around it, but like that part, nothing will ever go on it. But it's so weird. And it looks so cool. It's probably going to be like the tech bar that's a flop, right? Where they had the digital thing on it.
On the MacBook
Yeah,
Pros.
well, I mean, we'll see how many years they actually update the software to actually do cool things with it. Maybe next year they'll give up on it. But it looked cool. I was intrigued by it. I watched it, of course. But I was going to buy one no matter what.
No, I know that, but I dig your enthusiasm around it. I'm also an iPhone user. I think I have a 12, so I don't think it's as old as yours. You were on a 10 or an 11, right? I don't think it's as old, and I still really like it. So I'm not jumping to the 14 just yet, but that doesn't mean I won't once I see yours with all that, coolness to it, and I see the pictures. Because I'll be honest, even portrait mode, which was fairly new a couple years ago, is kind of influential for me. Where I'm taking portrait mode of my little dude, and it's like I got a model over here, and I'm seeing all this depth and everything. What they're able to do, not just Apple, Samsung's obviously there too, and LG, but what Apple's able to do with creating fandom around a purchase. That's a human behavior thing that is exciting to me as a marketer, and we're business partners in the marketing field. I know we don't do product usually, but it's so interesting how they can create that momentum around something that's technically expensive. You know what I mean? Like car companies figured out how to do this well. A few other kind of premium purchasers did. I'm intrigued by that.
And there's so many other things that we didn't even mention. There's custom fonts. There's an abilities like if your cell phone's not working, like an SOS thing that can send out via like GPS. So it's like great for not great for emergencies, but a backup for emergencies and things like that. New like non-shattering displays, like that should be like significantly stronger for drop protection and things like that. Like there are other things that go into this that are really cool. I mean, obviously the better camera is pretty cool and things like that, but there's a lot, and it's just interesting. It'll be, it's always interesting to see what new thing is featured, and then given our year or two and what things drop out. And Apple tests a lot of things, and we are part of their test market. Obviously, I feel like they actually added some new things this time, where I feel sometimes it's like it's just the same thing, just a little faster. This one actually has I think some pretty new and cool features.
Final note on it: did you add the new AirPods 2, or you did not? Pro, or add any of that add-on, or you just went with the phone?
I just went with the phone. I wanted it as soon as I could, and I already added a case, and it was like, oh, you'll get it like now a month later. I was like, delete the case. You'll get it on the 17th. And I was like, I'll take it.
Let's go. I'll take it with no case. That's awesome. And I think really fun for us to talk about a specific tech device this time around. Oh, baby, David, I'm excited about this episode in ways that I've never been excited before, partly because most of the episodes that we do, we're meeting people for the first time. A couple times we've already met, maybe one or two so far. But this time it was somebody we not only met in real life, I've met multiple times, but we hung out. We hung out in New York City with Caleb Smith, CIO and managing partner of Jefferson Capital LLC out of West Palm Beach. So we're touching where we're supposed to be. We're living in the Florida as we should. Caleb, how the heck are you? We're so grateful to have you.
Doing well. Great to be here with you guys. Thanks so much for having me. From the moment we've met, always enjoyed talking with you guys and learning from you guys, and really happy to be here today.
We are beyond excited to have you. David and I work in digital marketing, and we got to speak with you on that when we were in New York City, and you work on a more investing side of things. And could you give us a little kind of background in, since you are out of Florida, where that started for you and how that progressed, and why I think for any listeners, because there's been people that have heard us talk about NFTs briefly and Web3 briefly. We've even had another guest that had an NFT project in the past and things like that. They know that I'm quite passionate about it, and that David helps me. He's my foil. He's my foil to kind of making sure. I like them. I like them a lot.
Do you have any?
I have several. So tell us how investing came on your radar.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in traditional finance, in asset management, wealth management. Back I grew up in New York City and had started my career actually working in professional sports for the New York Giants. And after 3 years, I had studied economics and investments, University of Wisconsin, and decided to go that path. And it was a great experience, learned a ton, had great mentors. And, from there, I went a little bit more into the private equity route. I became a CFO for a technology company that was actually here in Florida. It was based in Tampa, and really loved the element of building a business and managing a team and having a mission. And fast forward to, I would say it was right before the pandemic, and kind of just viewing everything that was going on in the financial landscape. I really thought that the US dollar was in trouble, specifically because of what central banks were doing with printing cash. And so that's when I bought my first Bitcoin, April 2020, and then shortly thereafter Ethereum, and just got more and more interested and involved in the space. And so much so that I decided, I really want to pursue this. And I found a course at MIT to do executive education in blockchain technologies, which was an amazing experience, really incredible way to learn about the history and really the ins and outs of the technology and what, impacts it has from an economic side. And I was doing that concurrently with this idea of pursuing a path, to join a fund that was focused on digital assets. And through a connection from where I went to prep school, Deerfield Academy, I knew a gentleman who had founded a digital asset fund here in West Palm Beach back in right around the crypto winter, the original one, late 2018. And so I saw it as an amazing opportunity to kind of, get into the space, work with some people who I knew well and admired and really, hit the ground running. And it's been, some of the most exciting 18 months of my life and my career. The space moves at such pace and such speed. There's so much innovation, and it's really also the people in the space. Everyone is very collaborative and wants to help people learn, and it's really incredible to be a part of at this stage.
Did you dabble with anything? Because this stuff that you're in now is very modern and right this second with technology. With your previous experience literally running companies, CFO, even the New York Giants, was technology ever a part of that journey, or is that something fairly new for you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's interesting to look back. I was with the Giants in 2007 to 10, and it was really as we were scaling Giants.com, and we brought in the first, head of digital for the organization. And, it was everyone at that point, as Web 2 really emerged, and that's that time frame when it did, it was, you had to be there to be relevant and stay relevant and continue to grow your base. And then on the investment side, even before I became a CFO for a tech company, I was very interested in specifically semiconductor companies. And the reason being, at the time also, there was kind of a smartphone war, if you will. And no one really knew at the time if it would be BlackBerry, if it would be the iPhone, what about the Galaxy? But what I knew was underneath all of those phones, there were certain microchips that were embedded in all of them. That was something I found fascinating. And then having the opportunity to work, with a technology distributor and learn all about electronic components and board level components. It's really fascinating the amount that goes in, and it's to every industry. If you look around now, it's every industry has to do with semiconductors, and that's obviously a very important topic right now as far as supply chains, and those have been impacted the last year and a half, and that's disrupting every industry.
You said something that is impactful for David and I, just because our whole business is centered around Web 2. And you mentioned Giants.com and literally being there when they hired a head of digital, if you will. Something's happening now with what is being commonly called this Web 3, which is this next iteration of what and how we use the internet. Because some of our listeners are probably not super familiar with it, and that's okay, right? But this feels different than that. And I think you shared it with us, but from our previous conversations too, it excited you in a way that made you even shift literally what you were doing with your life. It just seems like this is now an all-in thing, and you taking even other opportunities beyond your own business that you've grown. I want to take it back to, I think, your first NFT and what triggered in your brain for why the tech would matter, not the thing you bought necessarily, but why the tech resonated, because we always like to go as deep as we can on the why someone would use a thing.
I think you framed that, perfectly, which for me, it wasn't about necessarily what I was buying, but more so what I realized by what I was buying. And for me, my introduction to NFTs was January of 21 when I bought NBA Top Shot. Growing up as a kid, I was a huge card collector. It was one of my passions. It was something I just loved. And I very quickly tied those experiences together and thought through, the mechanics of what that experience used to be like, which were the inefficiencies you basically faced, which was around, the second you got a great card, you wanted to get a Beckett to look up the price, right? So you wanted to know what market value was. Then if it was worth anything, you wanted to get a case. So you needed storage, right? And then from there, if you wanted to sell it, well, you either went back to the card store you bought it, or you had to, say, Mom, take me to the card convention at the county center. And so there's a lot of inefficiency around that. Now, of course, eBay came around and a lot of that business shifted onto eBay. But right, what we saw there, and I think this is actually a really important segue to where NFTs make so much sense in blockchain technology, is, you go to the eBay model. Well, look at what happened to the entire card and collectible industry. It 100% shifted to grading, right? And the reason for that is the cost of verification. One of the two biggest impacts blockchain technologies has is lowering the cost of verification. So is something authentic? Well, if it's on the blockchain, the source, it's authentic. And so when I took those three main variables and through that experience of buying those NFTs, I said to myself, wow, this is revolutionary. Not just game changing, but revolutionary. And I think generationally meaningful, and will define the next, 20 to 50 years for everyone on this earth.
It's kind of crazy to me that our journeys were very similarly timed. And I wish I had gotten NBA Top Shot a little earlier, just because there was not just the fact that I'm also a card collector, and I'm going to ask some literally like friend level questions here. David also has cards. I want to just let you know that, like at his office where he is right now, he can't because it's like a hardwired camera, but there's some rookie cards. I got him an Aaron Rodgers rookie card. He had cards before me.
Yeah, I was a 90s car collector with my dad, obviously. Brought you around and took you to the county convention, and it was like, who do you want? And you were like, Patrick Ewing, of course.
He's a Knicks fan. You being Giants fan, this is, do you have a bunch of LT rookies, like graded? What's the situation? Or who was and then I'll go right back to tech, but like who were your Grail cards, and did you acquire any of them?
Sure. So my Grail cards and same era, David. I was, early mid 90s heavy collector. So everything from some early Jordans, Ken Griffey Jr. rookies, Barry Bonds, Sosa, Shaquille O'Neal. I really got out of it as it was like Kobe and Duncan. So it was a poor exit at the time for me. It really was on timing wise, because, there was that mid 90s era where a lot of these superstars didn't end up having a ton of collectible value. No offense, love them. Grant Hill, Jason Kidd, at the time, those were the guys, but they just didn't pan out from a collectible standpoint. So love collecting memorabilia and autographs, Jerry Rice, Steve Young. I got John Wetland from the 96 World Series Sports Illustrated cover, poster framed. Big Yankees fan. Love the sign in the back there, David. Hopefully we can continue things this year. We'll see.
Judge is leading the league in home runs by a wide margin. So, I mean, it feels like some wins are happening.
To see. Yeah, absolutely incredible to see his season.
He's 6 away from, I think 6 away. He's at 55 while we're recording this. So he's 6 away from the Roger Maris record. All other records don't really matter at this point because
David's got it on tape. That's how he feels. That's how he feels. That's how a lot of people feel. And to loop it back around with the Sports Connect, that's what got us in, right? We were either card collectors as youths, and David has he's NFT curious. He owns some. He's involved at this point. He knows what it is. This underlying technology, this blockchain technology is right now, I think, confusing to the majority, right? You're expert level in it. I believe you even studied the technology. So in your kind of knowledge base and experience you have, how close are we to my mother knowing that she's using something that has built on the blockchain? Are we 10 years away from that? Are we, because I'll go back a little bit, I'll use my mother again. She wouldn't put a credit card on the computer back 10 years ago, right? That was a no-no. Sure. That was a thing. She thought everything was going to get stolen. So where are we in the understanding of what blockchain technology is, which is what NFTs are built on? And if you feel empowered to do so, if you want to even give us a little snippet of what the heck that is, because somebody might have been listening to this and be like, they're talking about just what is that jazz?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for a lot of people, the confusion and complexity set in because the term cryptocurrency became so prevalent and it was used to define the space for so long. Cryptocurrency is an extension of blockchain technology. And I think when you throw the word currency around and you start talking about money, it's a very complex issue. there's a very small percentage of people who really understand how money works, right? It's people who focus on monetary policy and work for the Federal Reserve and central banks. And so it's a very complex issue. And I think it took the conversation in a different direction, a complex direction where, everything comes back to, well, why is this valuable? And that's not really the way to approach what's going on with this technology, because at its core, it is exactly that. It's a technology. And so earlier I talked on the cost of verification. So this idea that, with a transparent data ledger, you can see and know the sources of this information, that it's valid, has tremendous economic benefit. The other one is cost of networking, right? And so a lot of people think also when it comes to blockchain technology, it has to do with the idea of removing intermediaries. And it's not so much about removing them, but it's changing the role of them. And there are so many intermediaries that are in our life that, and for by the way, for a lot of good reasons in certain situations, because we need trusted intermediaries before we had blockchain technology to help us facilitate certain, services and trade and so on and so forth. But guess what? They collect fees and they create something called deadweight loss in an economic system, right? And so when you think about the idea of quote unquote WAGMI, and really where that comes from and why that can make sense is, well, if there's all this kind of built up fat in the system that these giant corporations have basically been collecting a toll on, what happens if you spread that back out to the individuals and they own the property and no one pays these fees? I think there's a lot more efficiency that comes back, to the individual around that. And as far as duration and how far away are we, I think we're probably, I don't think we're 10 years out, but I think we're probably still somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5. And what it's going to take is, there to be more general use cases that make sense to people, and probably one big one that pushes people in. So when you think about Web 2, right, we all know, it was Facebook that lit that spark. And all of a sudden, it wasn't just, college kids using it. It became, you had to be there if you wanted to stay relevant. And I think ultimately that's what's going to happen in transition. And as we get more things in pop culture that have to do with NFTs, that's another trusted intermediary for people that say, okay, this makes sense. I think investment banks and the financial world are going to, they are already coming around more to this, but where I think 2-3 years ago, it might have been career suicide to, be beating the table around it. I think 2 to 3 years from now, if you're not in, you're going to be left behind. So I think there's a lot that will change over these next couple years, and it's going to be really fun to watch. And so I think one big thing that I see as a great use case has to do with sports is tickets, right? How many times have we heard a story about somebody buying a fake ticket? Well, why don't we just take that down to 0%? Mm-hmm. We can do that with NFTs. And then also, you have your stub in 100% pristine condition. So it's always a Gem Mint 10. And if you want to sell that experience that you were there, you have the ability to do so. So I think things like that make a lot of sense. And I think when people, really digest that and think about that, they'll end up seeing the same thing.
Do you think probably in the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be I've tried to not use the word NFT and use like token or on-chain or other things because the NFT word has some I think misnomers and misunderstandings on what it is. But do you think that there maybe be a breach sports team or I dare I say Ticketmaster or something like that, but a blockchain, expert or whatever whose job it is to do that? Do you see that like in 2-3 years? Is that 6 years? What do you think?
I think it could be sooner, as far as there being kind of a head of Web3, at some of these organizations, because, and I don't know how familiar you guys are with Chiliz and socios.com. But if you haven't looked into these folks, it's a concept that was started about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, based in Europe. And I think they have a fantastic model and something that's very interesting to me. It's the idea of developing these fan tokens. So Chiliz is an ERC20. It's built on the Ethereum blockchain. And essentially you need Chiliz to get these fan tokens. And they've gone and now signed up. They started with European football, and now they have a ton of NBA teams and NHL teams, and they're getting more and more into U.S. sports. Now, of course, we need regulation to come around for this probably to really go, to sprint mode and this start to really happen in the States. But I think it's going to become a huge thing, where fans can have some governance around some really cool, fun experiences. I don't think anyone's ever going to let them decide the starting lineup, but they could select, for example, what song do they play coming out of halftime, or what jerseys do they wear or things of this nature that, it really heightens the experience for the fans. They feel a sense of ownership. And that's what it is. It's driving deeper engagement through leveraging the technology. And that certainly is to come.
Big business has been playing with stuff like this, though. Even fan-controlled football, which is not a Web3 thing, although Web3 has adopted on top of it, being this test thing. Is it going to work? Do people care? Will people come into these smaller ecosystems? That's not the NFL. That's not the newly coming back XFL next year. These smaller groups. And I'm so intrigued because you said some powerful stuff there that, like, if not for Facebook, would social media exist the way it is? Absolutely not. If not for Amazon, would e-commerce exist the way it exists? Absolutely not. And we have yet to see what will be the massive domino that causes the other things. And to your point, we're not quite sure. You're given some awesome, I think, use cases, being tickets, for example. If Ticketmaster was the one that just all of a sudden was like, well, starting in 2024, all of our tickets are NFTs, there would be people that would be caught pants down, so to speak, and rushing to figure that out. And then there'd be the ones that already have their head of blockchain and their blockchain. Like Shopify already has a head of blockchain, right? Like that's a real thing. That's a person that exists already that was hired to do a thing, even though people that are using and consuming Shopify have no idea that that's being worked on kind of behind the scenes. But for me, I love that you share that about Chiliz and about just sports integration, because your origin being NBA Top Shot is actually a lot of people's origin into NFT, right? That was the largest single onboarding that I can put my finger on from what I've seen in the brief history of NFTs. Somewhere in the 500,000 users kind of came in, played. It may be a little more than that. You might know the better numbers. And the regulation thing you mentioned is causing quite a stir in terms of like governments trying to figure this all out. But when big companies do stuff like the NBA puts their stamp on something, it kind of really helps that adoption and potential regulation. DraftKings, this is again self-serving, but I know something about it. DraftKings is a publicly traded company. So there's again some protection and security control there. That's a good thing for the consumer, that they have accountability to the government. They've launched a blockchain product that I dare I say is a little bit masked. It is built on the blockchain. They talk about it. It's built on a layer 2, a Polygon off of Ethereum, but they are pushing it out as a daily fantasy game. A company like that coming in is like the Disney of sports betting, if you will. Them and FanDuel are like the only two players that are legit and have the regulation at their back already. Do you feel like it's got to be something like that, something at the scale, or maybe they don't even have enough behind them because it's already week 1 as we're recording this, week 1 of the football season. And I think it's going to take the whole season for people to understand that they're playing a game that's built on the blockchain.
I agree. It will take time for that product to grow. I think it is such a help to the space, having someone, in that regard, like a DraftKings and doing Rainmakers. And I think they were very smart to make a deal with the NFLPA, right? And you're seeing players talk about the product on its behalf too. And I think that furthers the mission because again, it's something that, people already identify with, they trust, they say, well, if it's good enough for DraftKings, if they're going to put their stamp of approval on it, there must be something here. So I think that helps. And, the question becomes, will it be an incumbent or will it be a new entry? Right, that really pushes the whole space past its tipping point. And I think when you think about a Shopify or you think about some of these other bigger businesses out there, Ticketmaster, it could be, you could see a tremendous amount of M&A activity over the next couple of years as well around these bigger companies, going after the smaller startups that actually have the wherewithal and the tech built, and then helping them scale, through their marketing channels and ability to do so.
You mentioned something I think is interesting, right? Is that right now in this space, right? The amount of kind of small players that are evolving in the technology of the Web3 blockchain. And I know we talk about DraftKings and, Shopify are big brands, but they're doing this on a big scale. But how many of these kind of little players, like you said, are going to start moving things along that the big players are going to need, right? So I'll bring up like an acquisition model, right? So like what is Instagram? Well, Instagram was bought by Facebook and it was a popular social platform. Or like some of these technologies are built by underlying companies that Google or some of these large ones are buying up. Do you see that there's some small players out there that you're really kind of bullish on that are like, oh man, they got something good? I think there's going to be a Ticketmaster is going to want that kind of, you talked about, I hadn't heard of that company before, but about the idea of like owning like kind of part of a team type of thing or having points within it.
Yeah, I think we've already started to see some of that, happen in the space, right? When you think about Artifact and Nike, or you think about what's happening with Gutter Cat Gang and Puma, I think some of these bigger brands, and we're seeing it in lifestyle and apparel, are identifying, there's some really great companies being built, and they have, the ability to really take us where we want to go in Web3. And I expect those partnerships to accelerate because there are a lot of tremendous talent in the space and people who are really building, but they need to scale. And to do so, they need resources. So recently, right, we even saw VFriends raised $50 million in a seed round led by A16Z, right? I mean, that's massive when you think about, for a seed round, $50 million of financing. Digidaiku, right? And Limit Break led by Gabe from Machine Zone, right? They just raised $200 million in a seed round. So venture capital continues to flow into the space. And I think VCs and big business see the tech being built and they want to understand how can they get involved, and we'll continue to kind of go down that path in a meaningful way.
That's awesome. For what you do on a day-to-day, do you find though that what you saw a year ago to what you see today, do you see that like, I don't know, how much has changed in a year? Is it, are we talking like leaps and bounds? Like it's not even the same space?
I think night and day from where we were a year ago, especially just around information, when it comes to NFTs. I think we were in such a the end of that runway last year, right? I mean, liquidity was so ample. So much had been pumped into the system and everybody was looking for risk on trades. And so, Q3, Q4 of last year, you almost could throw a dart. And especially if you got in on mints, right? They were quickly appreciating in ways that are not normal. I think
not natural.
No, certainly not. And certainly not sustainable. And as we got into Q1, you kind of saw the peak of that behavior, and which kind of really turned to greed would be the way I would describe it. And we were feeling that, we could sense that in the markets, people were just reaching at all sorts of projects. And we really kind of just went to like a neutral stance, which was, we really believe in the projects we know well and what they're building over the next several years. But let's take kind of a half step back and let, some of the next several months just play out. And so I think, there's a lot less new projects, kind of coming into the space right now.
Right.
And I think, it'll be the top echelon of projects that will weather this storm and come out of it on the other side. Yeah.
Do you have like where you think the technology will go or where the projects will be, over the next 6 months or a year?
I mean, we have, I think, a really exciting time ahead of us, with the merge, with Ethereum's merge event, transferring from proof of work to proof of stake. It'd be very interesting to see, hopefully that all goes very smoothly from a tech perspective. And it's going to take a lot of supply, out of the market. 14,000 Ethereum per week is typically mined by the miners. And so that goes away. And it's going to be very interesting to watch, if this does have a deflationary effect and how that impacts, pricing. I think overall, we are in such an interesting time for markets in general. Obviously the US Fed has a lot of work to do to try to tame inflation. Rates continue to rise, which is kind of a risk-off event and not really good for equities. And so far has not really been so great for crypto. But, I believe at a certain point, there is going to be a divergence. I think for crypto and equities to trade in tandem fundamentally does not make sense. They're two very different type of value propositions. One's more about, PE ratio and understanding free cash flow and what kind of profits are there. And the other one's more about transactional volume and network effect. So I do think the great divergence will happen. I'm hoping we are starting that, and maybe the merge is the kickoff to that. But I think it's a rough road ahead for the next couple years in the U.S. equity market. I believe in secular and cyclical movements, and I think 2009 to basically the end of 21 was a secular bull, and so we're probably into a new secular bear, which is really uncommon territory for most people in this country. But it could be 5 to 7 years until new secular bull starts. So I think as there are less opportunities in the equity market, more people start to look at this emerging asset class and think, should I take some risk in digital assets? And that's what I think will really push crypto in one direction while equities, underperform for the next few years.
Sure. Well, obviously it's you said it's unfound, unseen forces, right? We've never had, every month, every year, every point, right, is a new milestone for it in terms of how the adoption, right? It's never, we had the largest adoption, right, as of, what was it, of December or whatever, January. It was huge, right? Like, what does that mean? Does it help it? Does it hurt it? But at some point, was it being inflated? And then does it now level off in a more stable to be that thing that moves up with the markets? Does it go separate of the markets? I think, again, you're saying it, it's down, but it's down in a controlled way and in a safe way that actually might be better for the future of it versus it being on this like always path to the top type of thing.
That's not sustainable. Like, you can't have a market that always goes only up over the last 100 plus years. It doesn't work that way. But I saw a stat that there's more money that already got poured in from venture capital into Web3 and blockchain tech already this year, only 9 months into the year, not even, than last year, which was the bull run, if you will. So more investor capital is crashing in to the people building, the picks, the axes, the shovels, isn't that, and again, this is not financial advice or anything like that, but isn't that where when smart money goes into something, this has happened many times through history. We can go back to like railroad days and stuff like this happened. So isn't that tend to be a signal? Now, it could still be that many of those businesses do not succeed, but you have such a unique perspective here being a literal partner in a capital fund.
It is a sign that the technology is here to stay, because when you think about the lens VCs make investments through, they tend to be 7 to 10 year time horizons, right? So VCs are not looking to make a quick buck. They're looking to invest in something long-term and to shape industries and to build, real scale business. So I think to see the amount of activity we've seen this year, which, as you mentioned, is off the back of last year, which, by the way, was a record. It's tremendous to see the support that's coming out from VCs. I think there's actually more to come because it's still sort of a small group of these VCs who are actually writing these checks. And they're writing some big checks, don't get me wrong, but it's still a small circle of which VCs. And it's kind of the same names you see in the biggest deals, A16Z, Pantera, Framework, Double Peak, Animoca. Those are some of the main players out there. I think it is a great sign. It shows that they believe in the talent that's coming to the space. And I think that's a huge thing as well, which we really haven't touched on yet in the pod, which is, and I'll tell you personally, was my experience at ETH Denver back in late February. The amount of incredible talent coming from Web 2 into this space was mind-blowing. I was meeting folks left and right who were leaving Google and Apple and Facebook and Tesla and, you name it, because they see the opportunity and they see the challenge and they want to do something that, that can shape the world. And it's really exciting.
Do you see any Florida-based growth there yet? Is that something that's still more in the cities like Denver, Austin, New York? What are you seeing? I mean, you are in Florida, but you travel around as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of energy in Miami around crypto and blockchain and NFT is awesome. I think the mayor's done a great job to be a champion for the space down there. I was at NFT Basel last year when they hosted their first one. And, I think Miami is kind of becoming the Silicon Valley of the East, right? There's so many companies that have moved from New York and from California to relocate there. And has everything to do with crypto and blockchain, which is great for the state. We're creating new jobs and more wealth and more talents flowing to the state. And I think it's just great to see Miami is going to continue to grow. And with it, I think there's going to be more opportunity for everyone in the state of Florida. You
mentioned ticketing and we talked about sports. Are there any other major industries that you see being potentially being disrupted by this tech or being an opportunity for, like, again, I use my mother as a reference because she's on Facebook. That's quite literally why, to the point you made earlier, my father uses Facebook Marketplace to do his garage sale flipping. These are real things that, not that many years ago, they said they would not use it. They literally wouldn't. So What other industries do you think could be a part of some of what's coming?
So it's really important for our listeners to understand that every industry will be impacted by this. And I say that, and I say that confidently because, and I probably should have stated this earlier in the pod, but blockchain technology is a general purpose technology, or you can short GPT. So what is a GPT? A GPT is something that comes along about once every 20 to 25 years that impacts our daily lives and shapes every industrial vertical. These are things like the steam engine. These are things like electricity. These are things like the internet, and now things like blockchain technology. So it will impact every industry. But to give you some specifics of, stuff that I've read or thought on or can kind of see coming in the future. I mean, I think really that what will change the landscape for everyone is when more things that, as far as record keeping, really go to blockchain. So I think about something like your house title or something like your car title, which, by the way, I think, you hear kind of people say, I'm trying to sell my car. I don't know where my title is, this or that. And it's like, why go through all that inefficiency? But to get things of that nature done, you have to get municipalities and state governments and potentially even federal governments on board. And by the way, regulation is actually the thing that will take us to the next stage of adoption. So while many people have long thought regulation is bad or could be evil, it's absolutely necessary for technology and regulation to work hand in hand and to really get mass adoption. That's how you get there. So I think as we get more regulation and more clarity, that's when we can start to get more government agencies on board. And from there, you can get into more of the record keeping stuff. I think, things like, again, car titles, home titles, eventually healthcare records. Obviously, blockchain is huge on privacy and security, but it allows you to, have the ability to be, kind of versatile with your information, right? If you're traveling and, you're in a foreign place and you need emergency care with a doctor, well, it sure would be helpful if they had access to your records in real time versus trying to make a phone call across the globe and it's, not the right time zone.
I love that you went there. I love that so hard because I think you using the medical record reference kind of even blows my mind because I wasn't even thinking about that. Whereas I have pondered on the car title or those other like nuisances of life, if you will, that is a piece of paper somewhere or a data file in a weird place and not a way to easily access information, or having the ethos I hear a lot is like a public ledger. Like going back hundreds of years, the monks had to write a ledger to keep like who was paying for what and this bag of rice and that bag of rice. Blockchain offers that public ledger in a way that, just never, I guess, existed before using code, right? Is that fair? Like there's been ledgers through history, but there's never been a code, a cryptographic kind of way to authenticate it?
That's correct. I mean, of course, ledgers are and they're still used, even, non-distributed ledgers are used still currently, right? Like banks use ledgers to do reconciliation. And so the key is actually thinking about that whole mechanic. And this is how a decentralized ledger works and the brilliance behind Bitcoin and figuring all this out was how do you create basically the right consensus algorithm and create the right incentive model for this to actually work. And by creating that right loop with the miners, they were able to figure that out. Right. And so you created this trustless environment where you didn't have to know who you were interacting with. You just knew that the network was essentially there to protect you.
As more and more people are learning about this, and we share that opinion that this is a multi-year journey. I might have thrown the ball too far, 10 years, but I think you said 3 to 5. There's going to be listeners or there's going to be people that come into your life. This probably already happened to you, where they're going to say, Caleb, you're clearly an expert on this, right? This became like the most tech episode, which brings me deep inside joy. That's the whole what we're trying to do here. And they're going to ask you, how do I utilize this type of technology? I own a restaurant or I own a lawn service business. I agree with what you're saying. This is going to impact me at some point. Is it something that you feel like small business owners at the moment need to be proactive about using or more proactive about educating themselves for what's coming? Where do you kind of stand on that?
I think it starts with education. Before you can really use anything, you should always educate yourself on it first. And then from there, understand, okay, how can I build this into my model or what I'm trying to achieve? And I think for small business owners, right now, it's a way to get ahead, right? So I think a lot of times, in small business, you're looking for that edge on your competitor. And this is certainly a way, starting with learning about it so you can understand how to implement it, I think will give you a major edge. And there are so many different ways that you could start to implement this technology, whether it's through branded marketing or it's through, certain verification processes you want to implement into your business. There's multi-channels you could go down.
Again, like David, we've never had somebody that was as knowledgeable on a next level tech, right? Because again, it's what you study, it's what you do, it's what you're doing every single day. Is there anything, you obviously the managing partner of a capital firm, is there anything you want anyone to know about where they could either find you or on Twitter or is it more like, again, you work in, closed doors kind of thing, hat down, really finding businesses to invest in? What is a real opportunity for you of what's coming next for you?
Yeah, we have a couple really exciting things going on. One is I'm also working as the chief strategy officer for a blockchain gaming company called InfiniGods. So we're actually building blockchain games in Web3, which is really exciting. Tremendous team that I've gotten to know over the last 9 months. Really excited. On-chain gaming's grown 2,000% over the last year. So it's another just explosive area of the sector. I believe will lead the next bull run in this sector will be the gaming side, the GameFi companies. Gaming is such a big business, and I think the value proposition around why gaming on blockchain makes complete sense. When you think about digital ownership, and again going back to the ledger and having transparency and seeing really what's the supply on something, or how many of these have gone out into the market. It's a major value add for gamers.
Incredible. This episode's been, again, something I'm like getting emotional because I'm so happy that we were able to connect in this way. I know we knew each other ahead of time, but I'm grateful that you spent the time, because anyone that listens to this is going to be able to come away with literally a knowledge of blockchain that they would have had to search so many different blogs. They wouldn't have known where to go. And you were able to parse it down into something that I think, listeners will hear this. I'm going to clip some of that stuff and want to put it out there. You know what I mean? Not just the full episode, but there's some gems in there. So I can't thank you enough, Caleb, for being on with us. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we close it up today?
It's been awesome. Like I said, when I came on, Craig, David, since I've gotten to know you guys, 4 or 5 months ago, it's always been a pleasure. So happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me. And I hope all your listeners, enjoy the pod.
Hey, my name is Kai. I'm the founder of APAC AI. And I think one of the most helpful tech tips is limiting the amount of repetitive things that you do on the internet while increasing the amount of information and knowledge you consume.
Great tip, Kai. You can listen to our full conversation with Kai Gomez when episode 17 drops on October 4th. You won't want to miss it.
For details and show notes about today's show, go to floridapodcastnetwork.com. And we want our community of Florida enthusiasts to grow. Join in with our superfans, the FPN Insiders, on Facebook, Clubhouse, and GoodPods. Just search for FPN Insiders. And of course, find us anytime at iwantclarity.com.
Be sure to visit all the great shows on the Florida Podcast Network. You'll find them at floridapodcastnetwork.com. Video killed the radio star. Video killed the radio star. Pictures came and broke your heart.